Get out.
You want out? Fine! Stop! What are you doing?
No, please stop!
Enough! Stop it now!
Get out. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. Get out of my father's shop. The man with the crowbar just smiled. Then he swung it straight into the diagnostic computer her father had saved 3 years to buy. If you have ever watched someone destroy the only thing keeping your family alive and could not stop them, this story is for you.
Now, let us get into it. Emma Brooks had grease under her fingernails before she had her first loose tooth. That was the way her father told it anyway. Ray Brooks used to say that Emma came out of the womb already reaching for a wrench, already listening for the knock in an engine that did not sound right. He said it with the kind of pride that embarrassed her when she was a teenager and filled her with something she could not name until she was older. Something that felt like being chosen, like belonging somewhere so completely that the question of what you were going to do with your life never really needed asking. Brooks Family Auto Repair had been standing on the same plot of Montana ground for 31 years. Ray built the first bay himself with borrowed lumber and a second-hand lift that took him 4 months to get level. He poured the concrete pad on a Saturday in October with 3 friends and his wife Diane, who handed him coffee every hour and never once complained about the cold. By the time Emma was born, the shop had 2 bays and a reputation that stretched 40 miles in every direction. By the time she was 10, it had 4 bays, a parts room, and a waiting area with a small television that Ray refused to upgrade because, as he put it, people come here for their cars, not their entertainment. Ray Brooks died 18 months ago on a Tuesday. Heart attack. Fast. The doctor said he probably did not feel much. Emma was supposed to find comfort in that, and some days she almost did. What she did feel every single morning when she unlocked the shop at 6:30 was the specific and irreversible weight of being the only one left. Her mother had passed 4 years before Ray. Cancer. Slow and unkind. Emma had no siblings. She had her father's shop, his tools, his customer list written in his handwriting in a green ledger that she could not bring herself to transfer to a computer, and a debt load that would have made a banker wince. Ray had borrowed against the property twice in his last years. Medical bills, equipment upgrades, a slow winter that went on longer than anyone expected. He had always meant to pay it down faster. He had always believed the next year would be better. Emma believed that too. Right up until the moment she sat across from Gary Apprentice at First Montana Bank and watched him slide a sheet of paper across the desk with an expression that was professionally sympathetic and personally indifferent. Your father was a valued customer, Gary Apprentice said, but the outstanding balance combined with the current revenue trajectory. I know what the numbers say, Emma said. I am asking what I have to do to keep the shop, Gary Apprentice told her. The number was not impossible. It was the kind of number that would require everything she had and then some. It would require her to work every hour she was not sleeping. Require her to rebuild the customer base her father had spent 30 years constructing. But it was not impossible. Emma had written it on a notepad and taped it above the workbench where she could see it every morning. She had been chasing that number for 8 months, and she had been slowly getting closer. That was the part that made what happened in late September so devastating. Not just the damage itself, but the timing. Emma had been close enough to almost believe it. The rain started around 5 in the evening. Montana in late September turns cold fast, and the rain that came down that Tuesday was the serious kind. The kind that found every gap in your jacket and made the highway slick and mean. Emma had 2 vehicles in the shop, a 2009 Ford F-150 with a transmission problem that had been fighting her all day, and a Subaru with a busted CV axle that she had promised would be ready by 7. She was behind on the Subaru. She was going to have to call the owner. And she hated that call. Hated what it said about her ability to manage a shop alone. Hated that her father would never have been in that position because her father had always had 2 other mechanics to absorb the overflow. Emma had nobody. She had let her last part-time mechanic go 3 months ago when the money got too tight. She told herself it was temporary. She still believed that on most days. She was under the Subaru when she heard the bay door open. She heard 3 sets of footsteps. Not the hesitant footsteps of customers who were not sure they were in the right place. Deliberate. Measured. The footsteps of men who had decided something before they walked in. Emma rolled out from under the car and stood up. There were 3 of them. The first was broad across the shoulders, wearing a canvas work jacket with no logo, his face carrying the relaxed expression of someone who found other people's discomfort genuinely amusing. The second was younger, thinner, with restless hands and eyes that moved around the shop the way a buyer's eyes move around a property, inventorying. The third stood near the bay door with his arms crossed, not looking at Emma at all, looking at the equipment. "We close at 6, Emma said. "We are not here for our car," the broad one said. Emma set the wrench down on the workbench, not because she was frightened, because she wanted her hands free. "Then what can I help you with?" "Martin Gale sent us," the broad one said. "You know who that is?" She knew. Everyone in Clearwater County knew who Martin Gale was. He had moved into the area 4 years ago from somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. Portland, some people said, though nobody seemed to know for certain. And he had spent those 4 years buying property. Not all at once, not loudly, piece by piece. A feed store here, a hardware operation there. He had a development company with a clean website and a name that sounded like it belonged on a national park entrance sign, Clearwater Horizon Development. He wore fleece vests and drove a Lexus SUV and had a habit of showing up at town council meetings to talk about economic opportunity with the smooth, patient confidence of someone who already knew how the vote was going to go. He had come to see Emma 6 months ago, sat right there in the waiting area in the same plastic chair where her father used to drink his morning coffee, and made her an offer on the property. Not the business, the property, the land under the shop, the building her father had built with borrowed lumber and October concrete. Emma had been polite. She had said she was not interested. She had said it twice. Martin Gale had smiled and said he understood completely, and that the offer would remain open. Emma had understood, in the way you understand certain things without wanting to, that the smile meant something other than what it appeared to mean. "I know who Martin Gale is," Emma said to the broad man. "Good," he said. "Then this is going to be a short conversation. Mr. Gale has made you a fair offer on this property. More than fair, given what it would cost to bring this operation up to current code." He said the last part with a look around the shop that was clearly meant to diminish it. "He is asking you to reconsider." "He can ask all he wants," Emma said. "The answer is no." The broad man looked at her for a moment with that same relaxed expression. Then he nodded slowly, like she had confirmed something he had expected. "That is unfortunate," he said. Then the thin one picked up a tire iron from the rack near the wall and hit the diagnostic computer. Emma moved toward him without thinking. The broad man stepped in front of her, not grabbing her, just placing himself in the way. And the third man, the one who had been looking at the equipment, walked to the hydraulic lift and did something to the control panel that Emma did not see clearly, but whose result she heard. A grinding mechanical shriek that meant something had been forced that was not meant to be forced. The thin one hit the computer again. The screen went dark. The monitor stand buckled, and the whole unit went sideways off the workbench and hit the floor. And the sound it made, the specific sound of 2 years of her father's payments turning into broken plastic and ruined circuitry, went through Emma like something physical. "Stop it," she said. Her voice came out quiet, quieter than she meant it to. "Stop it right now." The thin one looked at her and set the tire iron down on the workbench with deliberate care, like he was being tidy. "Mr. Gale wants you to understand," the broad man said, "that this is a conversation you want to finish quickly. The next discussion will be harder to walk away from, structurally speaking." Emma looked at him. She understood that he was telling her they would burn the building down. She understood it clearly. And she felt something happen inside her that she had never quite felt before.
Not fear exactly, though fear was part of it. Something harder than fear. Something that sat in her chest like iron and had no interest whatsoever in being moved. "Get out," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Get out of my father's shop." The broad man looked at her for 3 full seconds. Then he smiled and walked out. The other two followed. Emma stood in the silence for a moment, listening to the rain on the roof. Then she looked at the destroyed computer. Then she looked at the lift, which was clearly not going to function properly until someone who knew hydraulic systems spent several hours with it. Then she looked at the total picture of the evening. The Subaru unfinished, the Ford still waiting. $2,000 of diagnostic equipment on the floor in pieces. And the understanding that Martin Gale had just shown her exactly how far he was prepared to go. She did not cry. She was not going to cry. She pulled out her phone and called the Subaru's owner and told him the vehicle was not ready and that she was sorry and that she would discount the labor. Then she sat down on the rolling stool by the workbench and breathed. She had almost forgotten there was someone in the waiting room. The old man had been there since 4. He came every Wednesday almost without exception and had been coming since the previous October. 11, maybe 12 months now. Emma had lost count. He brought the same motorcycle, a vintage Harley-Davidson that he maintained with the kind of obsessive consistency that meant he did not actually need to bring it in nearly as often as he did. Emma had figured that out after the 2nd month. She had mentioned it once carefully, the way you mention something to a good customer when you want to be honest without being discouraging. He had looked at her with quiet gray eyes and said that the bike ran fine, and he knew it, but that he appreciated having somewhere to be on Wednesday afternoons. She had not asked him anything further. She did not know his name. She had never asked, and he had never offered. And somehow, in 11 months, that had never felt strange. He paid cash, always exact, always with a brief nod of thanks. He sat in the waiting area and drank coffee, 1 cup black. Sometimes he read the newspaper she kept on the end table. Sometimes he just sat. Now he was standing in the doorway between the waiting room and the main bay. He was a lean man, somewhere north of 70, with a weathered face that suggested decades of outdoor living. His denim jacket was faded to the color of an overcast sky, and his hands, Emma noticed, were the hands of someone who had worked with them for a long time. Not delicate hands, not damaged hands, but hands that carried the specific, settled competence of long experience. He looked at the computer on the floor. He looked at the lift. He looked at Emma. He did not say anything for a moment. Then he said, "You all right?" "Fine," Emma said. The word came out automatic and entirely unconvincing. He nodded, absorbing this with no visible skepticism. "You know who sent them," he said. It was not quite a question. "Yes." "You going to do what they are asking?" Emma looked up at him. "No." He held her gaze for a moment, and something moved in his expression. Not surprise, but something that looked like recognition, like a particular answer he had been hoping to hear. "All right," he said, quietly. He went back to the waiting area and picked up his jacket and his helmet. He paused at the bay door on his way out. "I will see you Wednesday," he said. Then he was gone. Emma sat in the wreckage of her Tuesday evening and thought, not for the first time, that there was something about that old man she could not quite read. Something that felt inexplicably like the calm at the center of a storm that had not arrived yet. She pushed the thought aside. She had a Subaru to finish and a lift to assess and a mortgage payment that was not going to make itself. She picked up her wrench and went back to work. The next morning, Emma took stock of the damage the way her father had taught her to assess any problem. Calmly, specifically, without drama. The diagnostic unit was beyond repair. The hydraulic lift would need a part that she would have to order, which meant it would be down for at least 4 days, which meant she could only run 2 bays instead of 3 during what was historically her busiest stretch of the fall season. She had already lost 3 appointments by 8 in the morning because word traveled in a small town, and somebody had apparently mentioned that the shop had some equipment trouble.
She called her equipment supplier about replacing the diagnostic unit. The woman who answered, Sandra, who had been her father's contact for 12 years, was apologetic in a way that made Emma's stomach tighten. "I am so sorry, Emma. I would love to help, but we cannot extend credit right now on the account. You are already at the limit, and with the uncertainty about the business—" "What uncertainty?" Emma said. "There is no uncertainty. The shop is open." "I understand, but there is talk." Emma. "Sandra, who told you there was uncertainty about my business?" A pause. "Someone from Clearwater Horizon called us," Sandra said. "Last week. Said they were going to be developing the property and were notifying the business's creditors as a courtesy so they could manage their exposure." Emma thanked her and hung up and sat very still for 30 seconds. Martin Gale had called her suppliers. Before he had even sent those men to her shop, he had been making calls. He had been systematically cutting the ground out from under her. Her credit lines, her creditors, probably her customers too, if she looked closely enough. She looked closely enough. It took her the better part of that morning, making calls she had not needed to make in years. And what she found was a pattern that was both calculated and infuriating. 2 customers had canceled appointments in the past week, citing vague reasons. One of her parts suppliers had reviewed her account and was now requiring payment in full at the time of order, rather than extending the 30-day terms she had held for 6 years. Her insurance agent had left a message about a policy review that Emma had not thought much about until now. The picture was clear. Martin Gale was not just threatening her, he was strangling her, methodically, professionally, with the patience of someone who had done this before. Emma sat in the office and looked at the number on the notepad above her workbench, the number she had to reach. And she felt, for the first time since Ray died, genuinely afraid that she might not make it. She did not let herself sit with that feeling long. She called every customer on her list personally, not form letters, not texts, phone calls. Her voice, her father's name. She told them the shop was open. She told them she was her father's daughter, and this shop had been serving Clearwater County for 31 years, and she intended to continue that. She heard warmth in most of the voices she reached. She heard hesitation in some. She noted carefully which ones she would need to follow up with. Then she got back onto the Ford and kept working. Wednesday came. Emma was not sure if she had been looking forward to it or simply expecting it, the way you expect a particular weather pattern. But at 4:15, she heard the Harley pull in. She finished what she was doing, torquing down a bolt on the transmission job she had finally resolved, wiped her hands, and went to the waiting room. He was already there, coffee in hand, looking at nothing in particular with those quiet, gray eyes. "You came back," Emma said. "Said I would," he replied. She sat down across from him. She almost never sat in the waiting area, almost never stopped moving during the day. And she said, without quite planning to, "They have been calling my suppliers, my customers. They have been doing it for weeks." He looked at her steadily. "I know," he said. Emma blinked. "What do you mean, you know?" "I mean, I had an idea this was broader than one visit," he said. "Men like that do not use muscle until the ground has already been prepared." Emma studied him. There was something about the way he spoke. Not the words themselves, but the cadence, the specific economy of the language, the absence of hedging or qualification. It was the way her father spoke when he was talking about something he understood completely. "Who are you?" Emma said. He looked at her for a moment. "Jack," he said. "Jack Callahan." "Jack Callahan," Emma repeated. "And you come here every Wednesday because—" "Because it is a good shop," he said. "And because some things are worth keeping." Emma did not know what to do with that. She sat with it for a moment. "What do I do?" she said. She had not meant to say it. She had not asked anyone that question since her father died. Had actively refused to ask it because asking it felt like admitting something she did not want to admit. Jack Callahan looked at his coffee cup. "Same thing you have been doing," he said. "Keep the doors open. Do not flinch." "That is easy to say." "I know it is," he said.
I'm not saying it is easy to do. He finished his coffee and set the cup down and stood up. I will have a look at that lift before I go, he said. Emma stared at him. You know hydraulic lifts? I know a few things, he said. He spent 40 minutes on the lift. When he was done, it worked. Emma did not ask him how. She could see where he had improvised with a component, a solution that would not be permanent but would hold until the ordered part arrived. It was the kind of repair that required knowing exactly what you were doing, the kind of diagnostic intuition that came from decades of mechanical experience. She paid him for the work. He tried to decline. She insisted with a firmness that finally made him accept, and she watched him put on his helmet and ride out into the early evening, and tried to figure out exactly what was happening. She did not figure it out that day. The following week, the situation worsened. One of her parts suppliers refused her order entirely. No explanation, just a refusal, and a number she could call to discuss her account, a number that rang twice and went to voicemail. 2 more customers called to cancel appointments, and a man she had never seen before showed up and stood on the sidewalk outside the shop for 20 minutes, not doing anything, just standing there in a way that was clearly intended to be noticed. Emma noticed. She went out and stood in the doorway and looked at him. He looked back. Then he got in his car and drove away. Emma went back inside and finished the valve job she was working on and tried to control the rage building in her chest. The deep, structural rage of someone watching something precious and legitimate being dismantled by people with no right to touch it. That evening after closing, she was doing the books at the office desk when she heard something in the main bay. She grabbed the flashlight from the desk drawer and went through the door, ready for something bad. It was Jack. He was at the workbench repairing a diagnostic tool. Not the main unit she had lost, but a handheld OBD reader that she had thought was finished after one of the men had knocked it off the shelf during the assault. He had it open on the workbench, and his hands were doing something careful and precise to the circuitry inside. How did you get in? Emma said. Bay door was unlocked, he said, without looking up. Emma started to say that, no, it was not that she specifically remembered locking it, and then stopped herself. Because the more interesting question was not how he had gotten in, it was what he was doing, and why. Jack, what is going on? He set down the small screwdriver he was using and looked at her. What do you mean? I mean, who are you? And do not tell me you are just a guy who likes getting his Harley serviced on Wednesdays, because I have been trying to believe that for almost a year, and I do not think I can anymore. Jack Callahan looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, Your father knew who I was. Emma felt the breath go out of her. What? Not well, he said. We spoke twice, maybe 3 times. He was a good man. He cared about doing things right. Jack paused. When I heard he had passed, I came to see what kind of person his daughter was. And Emma said, I have been here every Wednesday for 11 months, Jack said, which I think answers your question. Emma sat down on the stool near the workbench. My father never mentioned you. He would not have. I asked him not to. Why Jack picked up the screwdriver again and turned back to the OBD reader. Because some things are more useful when they are quiet, he said. Emma opened her mouth to press further, and then, for reasons she could not entirely explain, decided to let it rest. There was something in his answer, not evasive, not dishonest. Something else. Something that felt like a man who had learned through long experience that explanations were less valuable than actions. She sat there for a while and watched him work. The man on the sidewalk today, she said. He is going to come back, probably. Jack finished what he was doing with the OBD reader, clicked the casing back together, and tested it. The display lit up, clean and functional. You keep the doors open, he said. You let me worry about the rest. I do not even know what the rest is, Emma said. I know, he said. He set the reader on the bench and stood up and put his jacket on. There are people, he said carefully, who have spent their lives learning what it costs to protect something worth protecting, not leaving honest people to face dishonest pressure alone. He paused. I am retired, but the things I believe in are not retired. Emma felt something go through her. Not quite fear, not quite awe. Something more like standing very close to a large, old thing and suddenly understanding how deep its roots go. The Hells Angels, she said. Jack did not confirm it and did not deny it. He just looked at her with those gray eyes. What I need to know, he said, is whether you trust me. Emma Brooks looked at this man who had been showing up in her shop every Wednesday for 11 months, who had fixed her lift without being asked, who had repaired her equipment after hours, who had sat in her waiting area and drunk his coffee and never once asked for anything in return. Yes, she said. Good, Jack said. He picked up his helmet. Keep the doors open Monday, he said. Some people might stop by. What people? People who heard Ray Brooks ran a good shop, he said, and that his daughter is worth knowing. He put on the helmet and started the bike. Emma stood in the parking lot and watched him go, and realized she had just agreed to something without knowing what it was, and realized more slowly that she was not afraid of that. Monday morning came with a cold front that dropped the temperature 15 degrees overnight and put a skin of frost on every windshield in Clearwater County. Emma was at the shop at 6, earlier than usual because she had not slept well and because being in the shop was the only thing that felt productive at 5 in the morning when your mind would not stop running the numbers. She had the first bay open and the coffee made by 6:15. She was under a Honda Accord doing an oil change at 6:45 when she heard the first motorcycle. She did not think much of it. It was a sound she associated with Jack, and Jack did not usually come on Mondays. But the week had already departed from its usual patterns in several directions. Then she heard a second motorcycle. Then a third. She rolled out from under the Accord and stood up. There were 6 men in the parking lot. Not young men. None of them looked under 55, and some looked older. They rode a variety of bikes, all of them well-maintained, none of them wearing colors. They sat on their machines for a moment after the engines died, and then the first one climbed off and walked toward the bay. He was a big man, heavy-set but solid with close-cropped gray hair and a face that had spent considerable time in weather. He walked with a slight hitch in his left knee that he did not seem to notice, or at least did not accommodate. Emma Brooks, he said. That is me. Danny Flores, he said. He did not offer his hand immediately. He looked at the shop the way a person looks at something they have been told about and are now confirming. Jack called me last week. I know, Jack, Emma said carefully. I know you do. Danny Flores looked at the bay, the 2 functional lifts, the workbenches, the tools. He said, You run a good shop, he said, and that you are in trouble, and that it was the kind of trouble that deserves better than one person fighting it. He said that. He said it the way Jack says things Danny told her, which means he said about 12 words, and I understood everything. The other 5 men had climbed off their bikes and were standing in a loose group near the bay entrance. They were not arranged in any formal way. They were not presenting themselves. They were just there, existing in the space with a particular kind of settled ease. The ease of people who are comfortable with themselves and each other and do not need to announce it. Emma looked at them and then back at Danny Flores. What did you come to do? She said. Whatever you need, he said. Jack said you were short on hands. 3 of us are mechanics. 1 used to do commercial HVAC but can turn a wrench on anything. 2 are here for other purposes. What other purposes? Danny looked at her steadily. In case those 3 men come back, he said. Emma understood. She breezed through it for a moment. I cannot pay you, she said. Did not ask you to. Then why? Because Jack asked, he said simply. And because we know what it looks like when someone is being squeezed out of something they built honestly. We have seen it before. He paused. We do not like it when we see it. Emma looked at him, then at the 5 men behind him, and she felt something she was going to have difficulty describing later when she tried to explain it to people who asked. It was not gratitude exactly, though gratitude was part of it. It was something more structural than gratitude. It was what it felt like when the weight you have been carrying alone is suddenly distributed across more than one set of shoulders. Not taken from you, but shared. And you realize for the first time how heavy it actually was. "All right," she said. She cleared her throat. "I have a waiting list from last week that I have not been able to get to. If your guys know what they are doing—" "They know what they are doing," Danny said. "Then come in," Emma said. "Coffee is made." The next 4 hours were the strangest and most productive hours Brooks Auto Repair had seen in almost 2 years. 3 of the men from Danny's group worked alongside Emma on the backlog. A real backlog, as it turned out. 7 vehicles she had been pushing to next week because she simply had not had the capacity. They worked without fanfare, communicating in the shorthand of people who knew their way around an engine bay. One of them, a man named Cal, who was missing the top joint of his right index finger, and did not seem to find this any impediment, diagnosed a transmission issue in 20 minutes that Emma had been putting off because she had been dreading how long it would take. "It is the solenoid pack," Cal told her, "not the whole transmission. You have a customer who is about to be very relieved." "How sure are you?" Emma said. Cal looked at her with an expression that suggested the question was being treated with more patience than it deserved. "Okay," Emma said. The other 2 men, the ones Danny had referred to obliquely, did not touch the cars. They moved around the exterior of the property in a way that was unhurried and appeared casual to anyone who was not paying attention. Emma was paying attention. They were positioning themselves with the specific purposefulness of people who knew what they were looking for. She did not ask. She let them work. At 11:15, the man who had stood on the sidewalk the previous week appeared again. Emma saw him through the office window across the street in the same position as before. Stationary. Watching. One of Danny's men walked out of the parking lot, crossed the street, and stood directly beside the man. Not confrontationally, not threateningly, just beside him, close enough for conversation. The sidewalk man lasted 40 seconds. Then he got in his car and left. He did not come back. At noon, Danny came to find Emma in the bay. "We are going to take a lunch break," he said. "Is there anything you need handled first?" "I need to ask you something," Emma said. She wiped her hands on the shop rag and looked at him. "These people Martin Gale is using," she said. "I know they are hired. I know they are not local. But Gale himself, he has been here 4 years. He has built relationships with the town council, with the bank, with suppliers. He has infrastructure." She paused. "What I am doing here, working hard, keeping the doors open, having people show up, it buys me time. It does not fix the underlying problem." Danny looked at her. "No," he said. "It does not. So what fixes the underlying problem?" "Evidence," Danny said. "The kind that makes it someone else's problem to deal with." He met her eyes. "Jack is not just making calls to mechanics, Emma." Emma stared at him. "What does that mean?" "It means that when Jack Callahan decides something is worth his attention, he is thorough about it," Danny said. He was thorough about things for a long time in a variety of circumstances before he retired. He does not stop being thorough just because he is not riding every day anymore. "He is looking into Gale," Danny said. "He has been looking into Gale since before you knew his name." Emma felt the floor of the situation shift under her. Not collapse, recalibrate. The way it does when you realize the map you have been using is less complete than you thought. Jack had been coming to her shop every Wednesday for 11 months. Her father had known who he was. And in that entire time, quietly, without announcement, he had been doing something more than drinking coffee and fixing lifts. "Why did he not tell me?" Emma said. "Because telling you before there was something solid to tell you would have been unkind," Danny said. "You had enough to carry." Emma stood with this for a moment. "How solid is it now?" she said. Danny almost smiled.
Solid enough that some people are going to want to have conversations they have not been looking forward to, he said. He went to get lunch. Emma went back to work. Wednesday came the way it always came, quietly, with the particular quality of light that Montana managed in late October. A low golden angle that hit the shop windows in the mid-afternoon and made everything inside look warmer than it was. Jack arrived at 4:17. He parked the Harley in the usual spot, came inside, accepted the coffee Emma had poured before she heard the engine. He sat down in the usual chair. For a few minutes, neither of them said anything. "Danny's men were here Monday," Emma said. "I know," Jack said. The watcher did not come back after that. "No, he won't." Emma looked at him. "You want to tell me what you have been finding out about Martin Gale?" Jack drank his coffee. "Not yet," he said. "I want to be careful about what I tell you and when." "Why?" "Because knowledge has weight," he said. "And I do not want to give you weight that is not useful to carry yet." Emma felt frustration rise, and then with effort, set it down. She understood what he was doing, even if it chafed. He was protecting her, not from Gale, but from the specific anxiety of partial information, from knowing enough to worry more without knowing enough to act. "Fine," she said. "When will you tell me?" "When it matters," he said. He finished his coffee and set the cup down. "How are the numbers?" he said. Emma blew out a breath. "Better than last week." "Not good enough." "How much short?" She told him. He listened without visible reaction. 19 days to the payment, she said. "I know," he said. "I am working every hour the shop is open. The backlog is clearing. Tom Reeves brought his pickup in yesterday and he is scheduling the rig inspections for next month." A woman named Patricia Holt sent her sister in Tuesday. "Word is moving." She paused. But moving at the pace of word of mouth in a small town is not always fast enough. "No," Jack said. "It is not." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "There is a man named Warren Gill. He has a fleet of 15 commercial vehicles. Construction company. Operates out of Grover County, about 30 miles out. He has been dissatisfied with his current shop for about 6 months but has not moved yet." Emma looked at him. "How do you know that?" "Because I had coffee with him last Thursday," Jack said. "I told him about this shop. I told him about your father. I told him what I know about how you work." He paused. "He is going to call you tomorrow." Emma stared. "You have been doing this," she said. It came out as a statement, not a question. "Some version of it," Jack said. "How long?" "A while," he said. Emma tried to count backward, to identify when the small, unexplained reversals had started. The customers who had returned with reasons that did not quite track. The referrals that had come from directions she could not map. She had not questioned them because she had been too busy and too grateful. But now sitting here looking at Jack Callahan, she could feel the shape of something that had been operating quietly beneath the surface of her daily struggle. "You have been running a campaign," she said. "I have been talking to people," Jack said, "about a shop worth supporting." "That is not all you have been doing." "No," he said, "it is not." Emma looked at her hands. They were a mechanic's hands, calloused, stained in ways that did not fully wash out. Capable. Her father's hands had looked the same way. "Why?" she said. Not aggressively, genuinely. Jack looked at his coffee cup. "Your father fixed my bike once," he said. "About 15 years ago. I was passing through. Belt drive problem, bad enough that I could not get another 50 miles on it. I walked the bike to the nearest shop, which was here." He paused. "Ray Brooks spent 4 hours on that bike. Would not let me pay for more than the parts. Said fixing a machine right was its own payment." He was quiet for a moment. "I have met a lot of people in my life. Men who said one thing and did another. Men who talked about integrity like it was something you wore on occasion. Ray Brooks did not talk about it. He just did it." Another pause. "When I heard he died, I came to see if he had left anything behind worth keeping." Emma could not speak for a moment, and she managed. Jack looked at her steadily. He left you behind, he said. The words sat in the air between them with the weight of something much larger than 4 syllables. Emma looked down at the workbench. She breathed carefully. The problem, she said, when she trusted her voice again, is that being worth keeping is not going to make the mortgage payment in 19 days. No, Jack agreed. But Warren Gill's fleet account might make a meaningful contribution. Emma almost laughed. It came out as something between a laugh and a sound she did not have a name for. Warren Gill calls tomorrow, she said. Probably in the morning, Jack said. He is an early riser. He stood up and put his jacket on. There is something else, he said. Emma looked at him. The men who came to your shop 3 weeks ago, Jack said. The 3 with the tire iron. I know who they are. I know who hired them, specifically. And I know it is the 3rd time in 2 years they have been hired to do the same thing to a different small business. Emma went very still. The other businesses, she said. 2 of them closed, Jack said. 1 was a hardware store. 1 was a family restaurant. The 3rd, a landscaping company, is still open but never recovered to what it was. And the owners never went to the police. They were afraid, Jack said. And Gale is careful. He uses distance. There is enough separation between him and the people he hires that proving the connection requires more than a complaint. But you can prove it, Emma said. Jack looked at her. I am working on making it possible for the right people to prove it, he said carefully. There is a difference, and it matters. Emma understood. He was not law enforcement. He was something that had worked alongside and around law enforcement for decades, and he understood precisely where the lines were and how to move right up to them without crossing. When Emma said, "Not yet," Jack said, "but the pieces are almost where they need to be." He put on his helmet and walked toward the bay door. Then he stopped. "Emma," he said without turning around. "Yeah, they are going to try something before the mortgage payment date," he said. "Gale is patient, but he is not infinitely patient. The calls from his man and the pressure on your suppliers are not working. When patience runs out, people like him shift to faster methods." Emma felt the cold come into the room that had nothing to do with the weather. "How much time do I have?" she said. "I do not know exactly," Jack said, "but I would say we are measuring in days, not weeks." He went out. Emma stood in the empty bay after the sound of the Harley faded and looked at the shop her father had built. She thought about what Jack had said about Ray, that he had spent 4 hours on a stranger's motorcycle and charged only for the parts, and that this had been enough for a man like Jack Callahan to cross state lines 15 years later to see what he had left behind. She thought about what it meant that people were coming. Not young men, not fighters looking for a conflict, but older men who had seen serious things in their lives and had decided at some point what was worth their time and what was not. Men who drove 30 miles on a cold morning and put on a work glove and got under someone else's car because a voice on the phone had said the right words. She thought about Martin Gale, who had never in his life fixed anything, who had only ever acquired and pressured and leveraged and walked away, who looked at a garage her father had built board by board and saw only a number on a balance sheet. She thought he has no idea what is coming for him. She locked up the shop and went to the office and made 3 phone calls. 2 to customers she had been meaning to follow up with. 1 to Patricia Holt's sister to confirm an appointment time. And then she sat at her father's desk in her father's office and wrote down every piece of information she could recall about the 3 men who had walked into her shop with the tire iron. Every detail she had noticed and stored away and not yet told anyone. She wrote it down in precise, careful, mechanical language, the language of someone documenting a problem accurately so it could be fixed properly. Then she sealed it in an envelope, wrote Jack's name on the outside, and put it under the cash drawer in the register, where she knew he would find it. Because she had decided whatever was coming, whatever Gale was about to try, whatever days they were actually measuring in, she was not going to wait for it. She was a Brooks. They did not wait for the problem to come to them. They figured out what it was, and they got to work. Warren Gill called at 7:40 in the morning,
just like Jack said he would. Emma was under a Dodge Ram at the time doing a differential inspection, and she almost let it go to voicemail. Something made her roll out an answer. Instinct. Or maybe just the accumulated understanding that in the current climate, every call mattered. Emma Brooks. The voice was direct, no preamble. A man accustomed to making decisions quickly. Speaking. Warren Gale, Gale Construction out of Grover County. I had a conversation last week with a mutual acquaintance, Jack Callahan. I know Jack, Emma said. So he told me. A brief pause. He also told me you run the best shop in a 100-mile radius, and that your father built it on the principle that a machine fixed right is a machine that does not come back with a bigger problem. That true? That is true, Emma said. Good. I have 15 vehicles in my fleet. 4 heavy-duty pickups, 3 flatbeds, 2 utility rigs, and 6 work vans. Current shop I am using has been giving me 3-day turnarounds on jobs that should take 1. Another pause. I do not like 3-day turnarounds, Miss Brooks. They cost me money I do not enjoy spending. Bring them to me, Emma said. 1 at a time or in groups, however works for your schedule. I will tell you how long each job actually takes before I start it. And I will call you the moment it is done. Silence for 3 seconds. Jack said you would say something like that, Warren Gale said, and she could hear in his voice the specific satisfaction of a man who has been told something and found it confirmed. I will bring the first one Friday. I will be here. She hung up and stood in the bay and let herself feel it. Just for 30 seconds. Just the clean, uncomplicated fact of it. Before she went back under the Dodge. Friday. Warren Gale. 15 vehicles. It was not enough to close the gap completely. She ran the numbers in her head while she worked. But it was a bridge. It was a span of revenue that changed the geometry of the next 19 days in ways she could work with. She finished the differential, moved to the next car on the board, and kept going. Thursday was the day things broke open in a direction she had not expected. She was in the office at lunchtime, eating a sandwich over the desk and reviewing the schedule for the following week, when her phone rang with a number she did not recognize. Billings area code. Miss Brooks, this is Detective Ray Sutter, Montana Department of Justice Financial Crimes Unit. Emma set down the sandwich. All right, she said carefully. I apologize for the unannounced call. I understand you may be surprised to hear from us. His voice was even, professional, with the practiced neutrality of someone who spent their working life having conversations that people were not prepared for. We have been conducting a preliminary inquiry into the business practices of a company called Clearwater Horizon Development. Your name has come up in that inquiry in connection with a property in Clearwater County. Emma said nothing. She was thinking about Jack, about what Danny Flores had said. The pieces are almost where they need to be. Miss Brooks, I'm here, she said. Go ahead. I would like to meet with you in person, if possible, at a time and location of your choosing. There are some questions I would like to ask and some information I would like to share, and I think it would be beneficial for both parties. When? As soon as you are available. Tomorrow, if that works. Emma looked at the schedule on the desk. 2,000 on Thursday. She had 3 cars coming in the morning, and the afternoon was technically full. 2, she said. Here at the shop. I will be there, Detective Sutter said. Thank you, Miss Brooks. She hung up and sat absolutely still for 30 seconds. Then she called Jack. He picked up on the second ring, which was unusual. He almost always let it ring longer. Detective Ray Sutter, Emma said. Financial Crimes Unit. He is coming here tomorrow at 2. A brief silence. Good, Jack said. You knew this was coming. I knew it was possible, he said. I am glad it came before... He stopped. Before what? Emma said. Before it needed to come from a different direction, he said, carefully. Emma understood what he was not saying. She pressed anyway. Jack, how much do you know about what Sutter is investigating? Enough to know it is real, he said. And enough to know you should tell him everything you told me, everything you wrote in that envelope. Emma's hand tightened on the phone. "You found the envelope." "Monday morning," he said. "It was thorough. You have a good eye for detail." "My father taught me to document everything," Emma said. "He said a mechanic who cannot explain exactly what she found and what she did about it is not a mechanic you can trust." "He was right," Jack said. "Tell Sutter the same things." "Will you be there?" A pause. "No," Jack said. "I do not think that would be helpful. This part needs to be yours." He hung up before she could ask him what he meant by that, which she was fairly certain was intentional. Detective Ray Sutter arrived at 1:58 on Thursday afternoon. He was younger than his voice had suggested. Mid-40s, she guessed, with the kind of undemonstrative competence that read as experience rather than confidence. He wore civilian clothes. He came alone. He accepted the coffee Emma offered and sat across from her in the waiting area and opened a small notebook. He talked for the first 10 minutes. He told her that the Financial Crimes Unit had been conducting a preliminary inquiry into Clearwater Horizon development for approximately 4 months. That the inquiry had been triggered by a complaint from a former employee, someone who had seen enough of Gale's internal operations to understand that the pattern of property acquisition was not clean. That the inquiry had subsequently identified a pattern across 3 counties involving at least 4 small businesses that had been subjected to various forms of pressure, economic, physical, legal, prior to property transactions. He told her that 2 of those businesses had closed. 1 had sold at below market value under duress. Only 1, a landscaping company, had survived without selling, though barely. Emma listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, "The 3 men who came to my shop." "Yes," Sutter said. "We are aware of that incident. We would like your account of it in detail." Emma told him. She told him everything. The way they walked in, the specific words the broad man had used, the deliberate quality of the destruction, the explicit threat about the building. She told him about the phone call from Gale's representative on Friday evening. She told him about her suppliers being contacted, about the man on the sidewalk, about the 2 businesses whose owners had called to cancel after being told she was closing. Sutter wrote steadily. "You did not call police at the time," he said. Not accusatory, just noting it. "I considered it," Emma said. "But 3 men who break your equipment and say words that are not technically a threat in a county where Martin Gale has relationships at multiple levels of local administration." She stopped. "I was not confident it would produce results that would help me." Sutter looked up from his notebook. "That is a reasonable assessment of the situation," he said. "I will not tell you it is not." "What changed?" Emma said. "Why now? Why is the state DOJ involved instead of county?" Sutter looked at her for a moment. "An inquiry was formally requested by a third party about 6 weeks ago," he said. "Someone who had compiled documentation on Clearwater Horizon's business practices across multiple counties and submitted it to the appropriate office with enough specificity to initiate a formal review." Emma looked at him. "A third party," she said. "The documentation was submitted anonymously," Sutter said, "but it was detailed enough to be immediately credible, and it contained information that we have since been able to independently verify." He paused. Whoever put it together knew what they were doing, and knew what mattered legally. Emma felt something move through her, gratitude so large and so specific that she had to look away for a moment. Jack. 6 weeks ago. Before she had even fully understood who he was, while he was still sitting in her waiting room drinking his Wednesday coffee, looking like nothing more than an old man who liked having somewhere to be. "What do you need from me?" she said. "Your formal statement," Sutter said. "Everything you have told me on record, any documentation you have, any records of the supplier calls, the customer cancellations, the property offer." And he paused. "I would like to know if there are other business owners in the area who may have had similar experiences and may be willing to speak." Emma thought of Tom Reeves, who had gotten that call, and felt ashamed enough to come in and apologize in person. She thought of Patricia Holt's husband, who had been through something like this 20 years ago in a different town. She thought of the hardware store owner and the family restaurant, The ones Jack had told her about. The ones who had been afraid. "I think there might be," she said. They talked for another 40 minutes. By the time he left, Emma had given him her formal statement, agreed to sign documentation the following week, and provided him with 3 names. Tom Reeves, a woman named Carol Stanton who had owned the hardware store and moved out of county but might be willing to talk, and a man named Dave Kowalski, who had not been directly targeted but who had received the call warning him that the shop was closing, and who Emma suspected had heard things in the community she had not. Sutter shook her hand at the bay door. "Ms. Brooks," he said, "I want to be honest with you. This inquiry is real, and it is serious. But these things move at their own pace, and I cannot make promises about timelines. What I can tell you is that what you have given me today is significant. Significant enough to stop what is coming," Emma said. Sutter looked at her steadily. "What do you think is coming?" "I think Martin Gale is running out of patience," she said. "And I think when men like that run out of patience, they stop being subtle." Sutter held her gaze. "I think you are right," he said, "which is why I would like to move as quickly as we responsibly can." He paused. "Be careful, Miss Brooks, and if anything happens, anything at all, you call me directly." He handed her a card. "That is my cell, not the office number, my cell." He left. Emma stood in the bay and looked at the card and thought, Jack set this in motion 6 weeks ago. He was already doing it before those men walked in with the tire iron, before the phone calls to her suppliers, before any of it, which meant he had not just responded to the attack, he had anticipated it. The night it happened was 11 days after Detective Sutter's visit. Emma had had a hard day. Not bad hard, the kind of hard that means you have done more than you thought you could, and your body knows it, and your mind is a half step behind catching up. Warren Gill had brought the second of his fleet vehicles, a heavy-duty flatbed, with brake issues that turned out to be more extensive than either of them had hoped. She had called him with the honest assessment, the way she always did, and he had said, "Fix it right. I do not care how long it takes, I care that it is right." She had fixed it right. It had taken until almost 7. She was the last one in the shop. She told Danny's men 3 of them had been cycling through in shifts since Monday, that she would close up herself tonight, that they should go. She had her reasons. She needed an evening that felt like her own, like the shop was still hers in the uncomplicated way it had been when it was just her and the work and the sound of the highway outside. She was finishing the paperwork on the Gill flatbed when she heard the first vehicle. Not a motorcycle, something heavier. A truck, maybe 2. She looked at the clock on the office wall. 8:14. The shop had been closed for over 2 hours. She got up from the desk slowly, the way you move when you want to hear clearly before you are heard. She went to the bay door, the small side door, not the main roll-up, and looked out through the narrow window beside it. 2 trucks, black, late model, no markings, parked at angles across the parking lot entrance, not blocking the exit, blocking the approach. And behind them, on the edge of what the parking lot lights reached, she could see figures. Not 2 or 3, more than that. She counted 8 before she stopped counting. Some of them were carrying things. She could not see what clearly. She did not need to. Her heart was going hard and fast, and she let it because the adrenaline was useful and the fear behind it was not. She thought I should call Sutter. She called Sutter. He answered on the second ring. "They are here," she said. Her voice came out steady. She was surprised by that. "How many?" Sutter said immediately. No wasted words. "At least 8, probably more. 2 trucks blocking the lot entrance. I am calling county now. Emma, do not engage. Stay inside and away from the windows." "I am not going anywhere," she said. She hung up and thought about the next thing. The practical, mechanical problem-solving part of her mind that never fully went offline was running parallel to the fear. Assessing options, measuring distances, calculating. She had a phone. She had tools.
She had a commercial garage with 4 bays and solid walls that had been built to last by a man who did not cut corners. She also had Jack's number. She called it. 4 rings. 5. She felt the first cold finger of something she did not want to feel. The possibility that he would not answer. That for all his presence, all his quiet competence tonight, she was actually alone. He picked up. "They are here," she said. Same words as Sutter. Her voice still steady, though steadiness was costing her more now. Jack did not say anything for 2 seconds. Then he said, "I know. I am already moving." And his voice had something in it she had never heard before. Not urgency exactly. Something under urgency. Something old and settled and absolutely without hesitation. "Emma, go to the center of the building. Stay away from the exterior walls. Do not come out until you hear me tell you it is clear." "Jack, go," he said. She went. She positioned herself between the 2nd and 3rd bays, away from the exterior walls, exactly as he had said. She could hear things now. Voices outside. Not loud. The sound of boots on gravel. Something metal against something metal. Someone issuing instructions she could not quite make out. She crouched between the 2 lifts with her phone in her hand and breathed. She heard the first roll-up bay door shudder, someone hitting it from outside, testing it. The side door rattled. Then something hit the exterior wall, a sound that reverberated through the whole building. Something heavy, deliberate, an announcement. "We are going to take this apart." Emma Brooks held her father's shop together in the only way available to her. By not moving. By not making a sound. And by trusting the walls Ray Brooks had built. Then she heard it. 1 motorcycle engine. Distant at first, coming from the north, from the direction of the highway. Then 2. Then she stopped being able to count individual engines because there were too many. The sound built the way weather builds. You could feel it before it fully arrived. A vibration in the air that became a pressure, that became a roar. Not chaotic, not scattered, organized. The sound of many machines moving together in the specific, coordinated way that said, "These people have done things together before." The voices outside the shop went quiet. Emma heard very clearly in the sudden silence someone say, "What the?" Then the engines began cutting off, one by one, then in clusters, then all at once. In a silence that was louder than the roar had been, the specific crushing silence of an enormous collective stillness. Emma did not move. She stayed exactly where she was and listened. She heard nothing for almost 30 seconds. Then she heard Jack's voice. Not raised, not angry, completely level, carrying in the way a voice carries when it does not need to compete with anything because everything else has already decided to get out of its way. "You still have time to leave," he said. She heard nervous movement, shuffling, the sound of men recalculating. Then a different voice, someone she did not recognize, with the performance of a man who was frightened and trying not to show it, said, "Who the hell are you people?" Jack said nothing. The silence stretched. Then someone else spoke, a voice Emma did not recognize, older, with the flat, unhurried vowels of a man who had grown up working outdoors. "Son," the voice said, "I have been riding since before your father was born, and I drove 400 miles to stand here tonight. You want to think hard about what that means." More shuffling. Urgent whispers she could not make out. The sound of a truck door. "If I were you," Jack said, "I would call your employer before you do something that changes what happens next." A long pause. Then the sound of boots retreating fast across gravel. Truck engines reversing. The specific sound of men leaving in a hurry. The kind of hurry that comes from having your certainty removed in a single instant. Emma stayed still until the truck engines faded completely. Then she heard Jack's footsteps across the parking lot. Unhurried. And she heard him speak again, not to the retreating men, to someone near him. "Get the plates on both trucks." "Already got them," another voice said.
Then at the side door, Emma, "It is clear." She stood up. Her legs felt strange. Not weak, just recalibrating. She walked to the side door and opened it. Jack was standing outside alone. Behind him across the parking lot and along the road in both directions, she could see them. Motorcycles, lined up with their engines off, their riders standing beside them. Not arranged in any formal order, just present, filling the road in both directions as far as she could see, and the parking lot lights and beyond fading into the dark. She could not count them. She tried and gave up. More than 100, maybe far more. She looked at Jack. He was watching the road where the trucks had gone. He looked exactly the same as he always did. Unhurried, complete, wearing the same faded denim jacket he wore every Wednesday. How Emma said, "I made calls," he said, told people what was happening, told them where to be and when. "How did you know when?" "Because I knew Gale," Jack said. "I knew the pressure was not working, and I knew what comes after. I have seen it before, in different circumstances." Emma looked out at the road, at the riders. Some of them were talking quietly in small groups. Some were just standing with their arms crossed, looking at nothing in particular. Old men, most of them. Weathered faces, gray hair. The particular settled quality of people who have been serious about serious things for a long time. "They came from all over," she said. "Several states," Jack said. "Because you called." "Because of what I called about," he said. "I told them an honest mechanic shop was about to be destroyed by a man who had already done it twice. I told them it was Ray Brooks's daughter." He paused. That was enough. Emma felt something break loose inside her chest. Not break in the damaging sense, break in the sense of something that has been held too tightly finally being allowed to release. She breathed through it and kept her face steady. Because she was her father's daughter, and her father had never cried in front of the shop. "How many of them knew my father?" she said. "Not many," Jack said. "A few. He crossed paths with people here and there over the years. He was the kind of man people remembered." He looked at her. "But most of them did not need to know Ray. They knew me, and they trusted that if I said it mattered, it mattered." Emma looked at him. "That is a lot of trust," she said. "It is earned trust," Jack said. "That is different." From somewhere behind her she heard a car, not a truck, a sedan moving fast from the direction of town. Then lights, official lights, and she understood that county police had arrived. 2 cruisers. Then, 2 minutes behind them, an unmarked car that she recognized as the one Sutter had driven to the shop. Sutter got out and looked at the road, at the motorcycles, at the riders. He stood and took in the scope of it for a long moment. Then he walked to Emma. "You okay?" he said. "Fine," Emma said. He looked at her with the measured professional gaze of a man who has learned to read people quickly. "You sure?" "Ask me tomorrow," Emma said. "Tonight, I am fine." Sutter almost smiled. He turned to look at the assembled riders again. "I need to talk to whoever is in charge here," he said. Emma looked at Jack. Jack looked at Sutter. "We got the plates on both vehicles," Jack said. The men carrying tools. 3 of them had what appeared to be gasoline containers. If County got here fast enough, they may still be within range. He paused. "There is also a phone call you should pull, 11 minutes ago, from a cell phone registered to a property management company in Seattle that traces back to Martin Gale, to a number belonging to the Broad man from the first incident." He paused again. "I had someone monitoring communications." Sutter stared at him. "You had someone monitoring?" He stopped. "I am not going to ask how." "That would probably be wise," Jack said. Sutter looked at Emma. "I am going to need a full account from you tomorrow." "I will come to you," Emma said. He nodded. He went to speak to the county officers. Emma turned back to Jack. "The phone call," she said. "You had someone tracking his communications." We had reason to believe he would make direct contact with the men when he realized the intimidation was not working, Jack said. Direct contact leaves evidence. I wanted evidence. You were setting him up, Emma said. Not a trap exactly, but I was making it possible for the right people to have the right information at the right time, Jack said. In the same careful language he had used with her before, the language of a man who understood precisely what was his to do and what was not. Emma looked at him. Jack, she said. Those other two businesses, the hardware store and the restaurant. He did this to them, and they closed. Why did not anyone... She stopped. She knew the answer. Nobody had called Jack. Or nobody who knew Jack had been watching. Or the moment had passed before anyone understood what it was. That is why I came to this shop 11 months ago, Jack said quietly. Because I heard what was starting, and I was not going to let it happen again. Emma stood very still. You knew, she said. When you started coming, you already knew Gale was circling. I had an idea, Jack said. You came here to protect the shop. I came to meet you, he said. And then I decided the shop was worth protecting. The difference mattered. She felt it matter. Behind Jack, one of the riders had walked up. A woman, which Emma had not expected. Somewhere in her late 60s, silver hair pulled back, the same quiet bearing as the rest of them. You are Emma Brooks, the woman said. Yes, Margaret Delray. I rode down from Spokane. She looked at Emma steadily. My husband's knew Jack for 30 years. When Jack calls, you go. She paused. But I want you to know, I would have come for Ray Brooks's daughter anyway. If someone had thought to call. Emma looked at her. Did you know my father? I met him once, Margaret said. 12 years ago. My bike broke down outside of Clearwater on a Sunday afternoon. Every shop in town was closed. I found this one and knocked on the locked door. Ray Brooks came out in his bathrobe and fixed my bike in 40 minutes and refused payment. She paused. Men who do that are rare. Emma thought of Jack telling her nearly the same story. 15 years ago, a belt drive, 4 hours, charge only for the parts. She thought of her father in his bathrobe on a Sunday afternoon, unlocking the shop for a stranger. She thought of Ray Brooks moving through the world without knowing, or perhaps knowing exactly what he was leaving behind. Not a building, not a business. This crowd of people on a cold night in Montana who drove and rode from multiple states because of what a man had been. Because being known for doing things right had a reach that Ray Brooks had not lived to understand. But Emma understood it now. Thank you, she said to Margaret, for coming. Thank yourself, Margaret said. You are the one who stayed. She walked back to her bike. Emma stood in the parking lot while county officers took statements, while Sutter worked his phone, while the riders gradually, without ceremony, began to start their engines and pull out in ones and twos. Some of them nodded at her as they passed. One old man with a beard gone fully white raised a hand without looking at her directly. The gesture of someone who has done a thing and considers it complete and does not need acknowledgement for it. By 10:30 the road was clear. The county vehicles were gone. Sutter's car was gone. The parking lot was empty except for Jack's Harley and Emma's truck. Jack was leaning against the Harley with his arms crossed, looking at the shop. Emma walked out and stood beside him. What happens to Gale now? She said. Sutter has the phone records, Jack said. He has your statement and the statements from Tom Reeves and the others you connected him with. He has the plate numbers from tonight, which are going to trace back to men who have done this before, which is going to trace back to whoever hired them. He paused. And he has what I submitted 6 weeks ago. What exactly did you submit? Jack was quiet for a moment. Financial records, he said. Documented communications. A paper trail connecting Clearwater Horizon to the closure of the hardware store and the restaurant. Insurance claims filed by Gale on properties he acquired shortly after businesses on them closed under duress. He paused. Insurance fraud. Extortion.
Organized intimidation across multiple counties. Emma stared at him. How did you get financial records? Jack looked at her. I know people, he said simply. People who know how to find things that are meant to be hidden, and people who know how to present what they find to the parties who can act on it legally. Retired people, Emma said. Mostly, Jack said. Emma thought about what that meant, the specific network that implied, the decades of accumulated contact and trust, the particular knowledge that came from a life lived in a certain way. She thought about the word retired, and how profoundly inadequate it was as a description of what Jack Callahan actually was. He is done, she said. Not a question. He is going to wish he had never heard of Clearwater County, Jack said. That is what I believe. Emma nodded. She looked at the shop, at the 4 bays her father had built, at the exterior walls that had held tonight against men with gasoline and chains and the confidence of people who believed money meant immunity. My mortgage payment is in 8 days, she said. I know. Warren Gale paid his invoice early, she said. I called him yesterday and told him what was happening and asked if he would consider it. He said he would have a check here in the morning. Jack said nothing, but she heard something in his silence. Did you call him? She said. I may have mentioned the situation, Jack said. In passing, she said. In passing, Jack said. Emma laughed. It came out real and full and completely without warning. The first full laugh she had produced in longer than she could accurately calculate, and it felt like something physical being released from her chest. Jack looked at her, and she saw it for just a moment. The thing behind the gray eyes. The thing he kept carefully managed. The deep, specific satisfaction of a man who has done something he believes in and is watching it take the shape he hoped for. Go home, Emma, he said. Lock the shop. Sleep. You will be here Wednesday, she said. I will be here Wednesday, he said. He started the bike. The engine turned over with the particular settled rumble of a machine that has been maintained with care, that has covered enough miles to know its own rhythms. Emma watched him ride out of the parking lot and onto the highway, the single tail light getting smaller, then disappearing around the long curve north. She turned and looked at the shop one final time. The exterior walls were unmarked. The bays were intact. The sign her father had put up 31 years ago, Brooks Family Auto Repair, red letters on white, straightforward and unpretentious, was exactly where it had always been. She went inside, turned off the lights, locked the doors, set the alarm. And when she walked to her truck, she felt the 8 days ahead of her, not as a countdown to something terrible, but as a stretch of time in which she was going to work, and good people were going to help her. And a man who had decided her shop was worth protecting had made sure that protecting it was possible. She did not know yet what morning would bring, but she knew she would be back at 6:30. She knew the coffee would be made by 6:15, and she knew that somewhere on the highway heading north, a man in a faded denim jacket was riding home on a vintage Harley, and that next Wednesday he would park in the usual spot and come inside and accept the coffee she poured before she heard the engine, and sit in the usual chair, and look at nothing in particular with those quiet gray eyes. And that was enough for tonight. It was exactly enough. Warren Gale's check arrived at 8:15 the next morning, hand-delivered by Warren himself, who drove the 30 miles from Grover County in his personal truck, and walked into the shop with the envelope before Emma had finished her first cup of coffee. He did not make a production of it. He set the envelope on the counter and said, "Early payment. Jack mentioned you had a deadline coming." Then he looked around the shop with the evaluating eyes of a man who spent his professional life assessing whether equipment and people could handle what he needed from them. "Place looks solid," he said. "My father built it to last," Emma said. "So I hear." Warren picked up the coffee she offered without being asked, which told her something about the kind of man he was. Comfortable enough in working spaces to not stand on ceremony. "I also hear you had some excitement last night." "Some," Emma said. Warren looked at her over the coffee cup. "You all right getting there?" He nodded, accepting this as a complete answer, because it was. He finished the coffee and set the cup down. The flatbed runs better than it has in 2 years. My driver noticed it on the first trip out this morning. He paused. I am bringing the second rig next Tuesday, and I would like to talk to you about putting Brooks Auto on retainer for the whole fleet. Monthly rate, priority scheduling, dedicated contact number. He looked at her steadily. If that works for you. Emma looked at this man who had driven 30 miles before 8 in the morning to hand deliver a check and was now offering her exactly the kind of stable commercial account that could change the financial structure of the shop in a single conversation. That works for me, she said. Warren Gill shook her hand and left. Emma held the envelope for a moment before opening it. Then she opened it, looked at the number, and felt something in her chest do a slow, careful rearrangement. The number did not close the gap entirely, but it changed the geometry of the next 8 days from impossible to very difficult, which in Emma Brooks's current vocabulary was approximately the same as a clear road. She put the check in the deposit envelope, finished her coffee, and opened the shop. By noon, she had heard from Tom Reeves that Carol Stanton, the woman who had owned the hardware store Gale had driven out of business, had agreed to speak with Detective Sutter. Tom had called Carol himself, had driven to where she was living now in Cascade County, and sat in her kitchen and told her what was happening in Clearwater. And Carol Stanton had listened and been quiet for a long time, and then said, I have been waiting for someone to make this possible. She called Sutter before Tom got back to his truck. Emma heard this from Tom in the parking lot, where he had stopped on his way through town. She cried, Tom said. He was a large, undemonstrative man who was clearly shaken by the memory of it. Not sad crying, the other kind. She said she had sold the hardware store for 60 cents on the dollar because she was terrified and had no support and did not know who to trust. And she had been carrying that for 2 years. Emma thought about 2 years of carrying something like that. The specific weight of having been beaten and having no mechanism to fight back. She thought about what it cost a person. Not financially. The other cost. The one that did not show on balance sheets. Tell her thank you, Emma said. From me. Tom nodded. He got in his truck and drove off. At 2 in the afternoon, Sutter called. The plates from last night, he said without preamble. Both trucks registered to a shell company in Nevada. Company traces to a man named Curtis Bragg, who has 2 prior arrests for aggravated intimidation in Oregon and 1 in Idaho, neither of which resulted in prosecution because the witnesses declined to testify. He paused. We have identified Bragg as the man who led the group last night. We are also fairly confident he was the broad man at your shop 3 weeks ago. You are arresting him? Emma said. We have a warrant, Sutter said. We are executing it this afternoon. And Emma, we have also obtained a warrant for Martin Gale. Emma sat down. When? Today. Both warrants execute today. Another pause. I wanted you to know before it became public. You have been central to this investigation, and you deserve to hear it first. Emma held the phone and breathed. What are the charges? For Bragg and his associates, organized intimidation, destruction of property, conspiracy to commit arson, given the gasoline containers last night. For Gale, Sutter paused, and she could hear in the pause the particular satisfaction of a careful man about to say something he has been working toward for a long time. Extortion across multiple counties. Insurance fraud on 3 separate property transactions. Conspiracy to commit property destruction. And criminal facilitation of the attacks on at least 3 businesses. We are still building the complete picture, but what we have is solid. The documentation, Emma said. The anonymous submission combined with your statement and Carol Stanton's statement and the physical evidence from last night. Yes, the anonymous documentation was the foundation. Everything else built on it. Jack built it, Emma said. A pause. I'm going to tell you what I told him when he submitted it, Sutter said. I am grateful for the work. I am not going to ask questions about methods. And I'm going to make sure it gets used for exactly what it was intended for. Emma thanked him and hung up. She sat in her father's office and looked at the photograph of Ray and Diane on the desk. Her father, young and grinning, her mother with her arm around him and her eyes bright. Both of them in front of this shop the year it opened. Before Emma existed. Before any of this existed. She thought, Dad. Look what came from fixing one stranger's motorcycle. She thought he would have understood. He would have understood it completely and found it entirely unsurprising. Because Ray Brooks had moved through the world on the assumption that doing right had consequences you could not always see and did not need to track. That the math of integrity was not the kind you could balance in a single ledger. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and went back to work. The news of Martin Gale's arrest moved through Clearwater County the way news moved in small towns. Fast and precise in some details, entirely accurate in the essential ones. By 4 p.m, Emma had received 11 phone calls. 3 were from customers expressing support. 2 were from local business owners she barely knew, thanking her for something she was not entirely sure she had done. 1 was from Gary Apprentice at First Montana Bank, who said he would like to revisit the refinancing conversation at her earliest convenience, in a tone that suggested earliest convenience meant as soon as she was willing to walk through his door. 1 call was from a reporter at the Clearwater County Gazette who wanted a comment. Emma said, "The shop is open. We do good work. Come in if you need your car fixed." The reporter laughed. "That is it. That is it," Emma said. She hung up. The last call was from a number she did not recognize, a Wyoming area code. The voice on the other end was a woman in her late 60s, with a careful, deliberate way of speaking that suggested she was choosing her words precisely. "Miss Brooks, my name is Helen Marsh. I do not think we have met." A brief pause. "My son owned the restaurant on Birch Street in Clearwater, the one that closed 18 months ago." Emma went still. "I know which one," she said carefully. "Ryan's Diner." She had eaten there. Her father had eaten there. It had been the kind of place that existed in a town's life as a fixed point. The place people had breakfast. The place people met. The place that had been there so long it stopped being a business and started being infrastructure. "My son moved to Wyoming after it closed," Helen said. "He does not like to talk about what happened. It broke something in him, Miss Brooks, the way those things do. Not the losing of the business exactly, the helplessness of it. The feeling of being pressed on all sides with no way to push back." She paused. "He heard about the arrest today. He called me from Wyoming. He was crying." Another pause. "I want you to know that what you did, refusing to move, staying in that shop, it gave him something back. I do not know what to call it exactly, something he thought was gone." Emma found she could not speak for a moment. "Miss Brooks, I am here," Emma said. "I am sorry about your son's restaurant." "So am I," Helen said. "But I am glad something good came from it, even if it came late." She paused one more time. "Your father would be very proud." She hung up. Emma sat with the phone in her hand for a full minute. Then she put it down and pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes and breathed through whatever was happening in her chest. Breathing through it the way you breathe through difficult mechanical work, steadily, without rushing, until it was done. Then she picked up the phone again and called Jack. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Sutter told me," she said. "I heard," Jack said. "Were you surprised?" "No." "Were you satisfied?" A pause, longer than usual. "Ask me when it is finished," he said. "Arrests are not convictions." Sutter seems confident. "Sutter should be," Jack said. "The case is solid, but I have seen solid cases take unexpected turns, and I do not celebrate until there is something permanent to celebrate." Emma absorbed this. "Helen Marsh called me," Emma said. Silence. "Ryan Marsh's mother," Emma said. "The restaurant." "I know who she is," Jack said quietly. "You know the family?" "I know what happened to them," Jack said. "I found out about it when I was looking into Gale, before I started coming to your shop.
Another pause. Ryan Marsh was 28 years old when that restaurant closed. He had spent 4 years building it. His grandmother's recipes, his grandfather's name above the door. Jack's voice was level, but the levelness was doing work. Gale's people spent 3 months destroying his supplier relationships and his customer base before they made the offer. When Ryan refused, they filed false code complaints that tied him up in inspections for 2 months. By the time he had nothing left, the offer was half what it had been at the start. Emma thought about 28 years old, about 4 years of work, about your grandmother's recipes and your grandfather's name, and the specific, irreversible grief of watching it taken apart by people who had no right to touch it. "That is why you came," she said, "not just for my father's motorcycle." "Your father's motorcycle was the reason I knew this place," Jack said. "Ryan Marsh was part of the reason I came back." Emma closed her eyes. "You have been carrying this for a long time," she said. "Some things are worth carrying," Jack said, "until you can put them down properly." He was quiet for a moment. "How is the shop?" he said. Emma almost smiled. The question, direct and practical, the return to what could be measured, was so entirely Jack that it cut through everything else like a clean line. "The shop is good," she said. "Warren Gill's retainer starts next month. Carol Stanton is talking to Sutter. Tom Reeves is scheduling the rig inspections. The mortgage payment is going to the bank on Friday." She paused. "The shop is good, Jack." "Good," he said. "I will see you Wednesday." He hung up. The following days moved with the specific, productive momentum of a situation that has been released from the pressure that was deforming it. Emma worked long hours, but they were good long hours, the kind where the work itself provided its own satisfaction, where each car fixed and each customer served felt like an argument being made, a point being proven, a position being held. She made the mortgage payment on Friday morning. Gary Apprentice personally processed the transaction. "I would like to discuss the refinancing options I mentioned," Gary said in the careful tone of a man managing a relationship that had become more complicated than he had anticipated. "Schedule it for next week," Emma said. "I have a shop to run today." She walked out before he could respond. On Saturday, something happened that she had not anticipated. Dave Kowalski, the retired electrician who had shaken her hand the morning after the original attack and said, "Call me if you need anything," showed up at the shop with 3 other men. Not for car repairs. They came with tools. "We heard the lift has been running on a temporary fix for weeks," Dave said, standing in the bay with a toolbox in his hand and the uncomplicated manner of a man who has decided to do something and is simply doing it. "We are going to fix it properly." Emma stared at him. "How do you know about the lift?" "Small town," Dave said. He set the toolbox down. Also, Jack mentioned it. Emma made a sound that was half laugh and half something she could not categorize. "Of course he did," she said. Dave and his 3 friends spent 4 hours on the lift. They were not mechanics, but they were experienced tradesmen, and the hydraulic system was within their collective competence. When they were done, the lift ran cleaner and smoother than it had since her father had last serviced it. She tried to pay them. Dave looked at the check she offered and then looked at her. "Emma," he said, "your father fixed my truck for free in 2014. Said it was a quick job, and he would not feel right charging for something that took him 20 minutes. I have been meaning to do something about that ever since." He pushed the check back. "Consider us even." Emma put the check away. She understood with a clarity that was almost physical what her father had been building. Not the shop, something under the shop. Something that could not be seen in the numbers or the bays or the equipment. The accumulated weight of 31 years of doing things right, of charging honestly, of staying late when someone needed help and not making a production of it. The specific and invisible architecture of a reputation that meant something real. Martin Gale had tried to buy a building. He had no idea what was underneath it. Wednesday came. Jack arrived at 4:15. He parked in the usual spot, walked in, accepted the coffee, and sat in the usual chair. He had a newspaper with him, which was unusual.
He set it on the ends table without looking at it. Gale's attorney filed a motion yesterday, he said, to have the financial records excluded as evidence, arguing improper acquisition. Emma went still. Can he do that? He can file the motion, Jack said. Whether it succeeds is a different question. Sutter says the records were obtained through means that will withstand scrutiny. I believe him. A pause. But Gale has resources. He is going to fight. Of course he is, Emma said. I want you to be prepared for the possibility that this takes longer than we would like, Jack said. Courts are not fast. Evidence is contested. Men with money hire good lawyers. But it will hold, Emma said. The case will hold. Jack looked at her steadily. Yes, he said. It will hold. Emma nodded. She sat down across from him. Tell me something, she said. What? The night those men came to the shop, the night you were all there. She paused. How did you know they would come that night specifically? You told me we were measuring in days, but you had everyone in place. Curtis Bragg arrived in Clearwater County 6 days before that night, Jack said. I knew when he crossed the county line. Emma stared. You were tracking him. Someone was tracking the vehicles associated with the shell company, Jack said carefully. When the primary vehicle entered Clearwater County and began what appeared to be reconnaissance, I started making calls. You coordinated over 200 riders in less than a week. The calls had already been made, Jack said. People were already ready. I just gave them the date. Emma absorbed this, the specific, staggering scope of what he had orchestrated. Quietly, without drama, without any visible sign of effort. Jack, she said, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly. He looked at her. Did you ever doubt it would work? She said. Any of it? Did you ever think he might win? Jack was quiet for a long moment. Yes, he said. Twice. The first time was when I found out how far back his relationships with local administration went. He had been more careful than I expected, spread more money in more directions. He paused. I thought for a few days that we might not be able to get the state involved, that it would stay local and get buried. What changed? The former employee who filed the initial complaint, Jack said. I did not find her. She found the right office on her own. She had been carrying it for a year and a half, and she had finally had enough. He paused. When Sutter told me the investigation was already open when I submitted my documentation that someone else had already lit the fuse, I understood that Gale had made more enemies than he knew. And the second time, Emma said. Jack looked at his coffee cup. The second time was the night those 3 men walked into your shop, he said. I was in the parking lot when it happened. I came in late that afternoon because I had a feeling. I sat in the lot and I watched them go in, and I listened. A pause. And I thought, if she calls police right now, it becomes local. It gets managed. Gale buries it. And if she does not call police, she is handling this alone. But I did not call police, Emma said slowly. No, Jack said. You told them to get out, and you sat down in your shop, and you stayed. He looked at her. I watched you through the window. You sat on that stool for about 4 minutes, and then you picked up your wrench and went back to work. Emma did not speak. That was when I knew, Jack said. Not that it would be easy, that it would hold together, because you would hold it together. The words settled in the room with the quiet authority of something that did not need elaboration. Emma looked at this old man in his faded jacket with his careful eyes and his economical language, and the 30-year weight of earned trust that had brought 200 people to a Montana parking lot on a cold night. She thought about what it cost to be a person like Jack Callahan. Not the obvious cost. Not the years of whatever his life had been before retirement, but the cost of caring this much about this particular kind of thing. The cost of being made in a way that meant you could not drive past an honest business being destroyed without doing something about it. Jack, she said, what can I do for you? I mean that seriously,
Not the coffee, not the Wednesday visits. What can I actually do for you? He looked at her for a moment. Keep running a good shop, he said. That is not enough. It is everything, he said. You do not understand yet how rare it is. You will. Emma looked at him. My father told you the same thing, did he not? She said. When you asked him what you owed him for the motorcycle. Jack almost smiled. It was the closest to a smile she had ever seen from him. A slight shift at the corners of his mouth. A brief warmth in the gray eyes. Something like it, he said. 3 weeks after the arrest, the first of Martin Gale's former victims came back to Clearwater County. It was not Ryan Marsh. Ryan was not ready for that. And Emma understood it without needing it explained. But a man named Gerald Holton, who had been one of the suppliers pressured into dropping Brooks' auto as a client, drove to the shop on a Thursday morning with a written apology and an offer to restore the account on better terms than they had had before. He was not a man accustomed to apology. Emma could see that. And the discomfort it caused him made the gesture more meaningful, not less. I should have called you when Gale's people contacted me, Gerald said. I should have told you instead of just quietly pulling back. He looked at the floor. I was afraid of causing trouble. You are here now, Emma said. I am. And I heard about the hardware store, Carol Stanton. I heard she is considering reopening. Emma looked up. She is talking about it, Gerald said. Heard it from her cousin. Apparently the arrest gave her the idea that things might be different now. He paused. If she needs supplier terms to get started again, I would like to be part of making that possible. Emma looked at Gerald Holton and thought about the specific expanding ripple of a single decision to not move. Every person who had been afraid and stayed afraid while Gale operated unchecked. Every one of them was now reconsidering what was possible. Not because of some grand gesture, because one mechanic in a rural garage had refused to sell, and refused to stop, and refused to let the weight of it break her. This, she thought, is what Jack meant by keeping a good shop. Not the oil changes, not the transmissions, the staying. The following Wednesday, Jack came in at the usual time and found the waiting area changed. Not dramatically. Emma had not rearranged the furniture or put up decorations, but she had framed something and hung it on the wall beside the door. It was a photograph of her father. Not a formal portrait. A photograph from maybe 15 years ago. Ray Brooks standing in one of the bays with a wrench in his hand and grease on his shirt, and a completely unself-conscious grin on his face. The grin of a man who is exactly where he is supposed to be. Below the photograph, in a simple frame, a handwritten card that Emma had written herself in her father's style. Practical, without flourish. Brooks Family Auto Repair, established 1993. We fix things right. Jack looked at the photograph for a long time. Emma gave him his coffee and sat down. He would have liked you, she said. I know, Jack said. Without arrogance, just as a plain fact. The way you state something you have thought about carefully and arrived at honestly. What would he have said to you, Emma said, if he had known what you did? Jack looked at the photograph. He would have said, thank you, Jack said. And then he would have said, he hoped I had not gone to too much trouble and that the coffee was on him. He paused. And then he would have gone back to work. Because that is what people like your father do. They do not spend long in the moment. They are already thinking about the next car. Emma laughed softly. That is exactly right, she said. Jack drank his coffee. Sutter called me this morning, he said. Emma looked at him. The motion to exclude the financial records was denied, Jack said. The judge ruled that the documentation was properly handled and is admissible. He paused. Gale's attorney has indicated he will seek a plea arrangement. Emma breathed. He is going to plead out, she said. Almost certainly, Jack said. The evidence is too complete. He will negotiate for a reduced sentence in exchange for cooperation, which means he will name the people he worked with and the other businesses he targeted beyond what we already know. A pause. It is not a trial. It is not a public reckoning the way I might have preferred.
but it is permanent. It goes on record, and it exposes everything he built. Emma thought about the hardware store and the restaurant, about Ryan Marsh, 28 years old, with his grandmother's recipes and his grandfather's name, driving to Wyoming with something broken in him. The victims get acknowledged, she said. The victims get acknowledged, Jack confirmed, in the plea and the documentation, in the civil suits that are going to follow the criminal proceedings. Carol Stanton has already retained an attorney. He paused. Ryan Marsh will have someone contact her as well, I believe, once he is ready. Emma looked at Jack. You are still managing this, she said. Even now. I am having conversations, he said, with people who need information to make their own decisions. Emma shook her head slowly. Not in exasperation, in something closer to wonder. You are the most thoroughly involved, uninvolved person I have ever met. I prefer to think of it as being useful, Jack said. You prefer not to have to explain yourself, Emma said, the almost smile again. That too, he said. He finished his coffee and set the cup down. He looked at the photograph of Ray Brooks one more time. Emma, he said. Yeah, your father spent 31 years building something in this town. Not just the shop, the thing underneath the shop. The reason people drove out here in the cold, and the reason Tom Reeves came in with his hat in his hands, and the reason Carol Stanton answered the phone. He paused. That does not go away when one man decides he wants the land. It goes underground for a while, but it does not go away. Emma felt the truth of it land in her chest with the specific weight of something she had known but not yet been able to articulate. He did not know he was building it, she said. He was just fixing cars. The best things are always built that way, Jack said. He stood up and put on his jacket. I will see you Wednesday, he said. Jack, Emma said. He paused. Thank you, she said. I know you do not want it, and I know you will deflect it, but I need to say it. Thank you. He looked at her for a moment with those gray eyes that had seen considerable amounts of the world in their time, and he said very simply, Your father left something worth keeping. I just made sure it stayed. Then he walked out to the Harley and put on the helmet and started the engine and pulled out of the lot. Emma watched him go. She turned and looked at the shop, the 4 bays, the equipment, the tools, the waiting area with the photograph of her father and the simple sign he had never gotten to see. She thought about what Jack had said. The best things are always built that way. She thought about 31 years of fixing things right and charging honestly and staying open when it would have been easier to close. She thought about a stranger's motorcycle on a Sunday afternoon and a man in a bathrobe who never asked for thanks. She thought about the invisible architecture of a life lived with integrity, how it extended outward in directions you could not see, touched people you would never meet, created debts that were repaid in forms you would never expect. She thought about 8 days and a mortgage payment, and 200 motorcycles on a cold Montana highway, and a detective in Billings working through a case built on a foundation that an old man in a faded jacket had spent months quietly laying. Because 30 years ago a mechanic had fixed his belt drive and charged only for the parts. She put down her coffee, she picked up the next work order on the board, and she went back to work. Because that was what people like Emma Brooks did. They did not spend long in the moment. They were already thinking about the next car. Martin Gale entered his plea on a Thursday morning in November, in a Billings courtroom that was quieter than Emma had expected. She had driven up the night before and stayed in a motel off the interstate. She had not slept well, which she had anticipated. She lay in the dark and listened to the highway outside and ran through the months behind her the way she sometimes ran through a complicated repair in her head before starting it, mapping each step, each decision, each moment where it could have gone differently. She had almost sold. Not seriously, not for long. But there had been one night in early October, about a week before Warren Gill called, when she had sat at her father's desk and looked at the numbers, and felt the specific exhausted despair of a person who has been fighting hard for a long time and cannot see the end of it. She had sat with that feeling for maybe 20 minutes. Then she had gotten up and locked the shop and driven home and made herself eat something and gone to sleep. In the morning, she had gone back. She thought about that night in the Billings motel and understood that the 20 minutes in her father's office had been the closest Gale ever actually came to winning. Not the men with the crowbar, not the phone calls to her suppliers, not the trucks in the parking lot with the gasoline containers. 20 minutes of private despair in a locked office that nobody ever knew about. She had not told Jack about that night. She thought, lying in the motel dark, that she might tell him someday. The courtroom was small and procedural. Gale's attorney did most of the talking in the careful, measured language of managing a situation rather than arguing one. Gale himself sat with the contained, inward quality of a man who has spent time deciding exactly how much of himself to show and has settled on very little. He was 53, younger than Emma had somehow imagined, with the kind of surface polish that came from money and the practice of appearing confident in every room. He did not look at her. She sat in the gallery and watched him, and understood that to Martin Gale she had never been a person. She had been an obstacle, then an inconvenience, then a problem that required escalating solutions. The idea that she might be someone's daughter, that the building he wanted sat on 31 years of a family's life, had simply not registered as relevant data. That, Emma thought, was his actual failure. Not getting caught. Failing to understand what he was dealing with before it was too late to recalculate. The plea was entered. Gale pleaded guilty to extortion conspiracy and 2 counts of criminal facilitation. The financial fraud charges were consolidated. Sentencing would come in 60 days. His cooperation agreement required him to provide testimony and documentation regarding 2 associates in other counties who had been operating similar acquisition schemes. It took 45 minutes. Emma drove back to Clearwater County in the early afternoon and opened the shop at 2 and finished 3 jobs before closing. She called Jack from the parking lot before she drove home. "It is done," she said. A pause. "Good," Jack said. "You were right," Emma said. "It was not a trial. It was not a public reckoning." "No, but it was permanent." "Yes," she said. "It was permanent." Emma sat in her truck and looked at the shop sign. Brooks Family Auto Repair, red letters on white, and felt the specific, quiet satisfaction of a thing completed. Not triumph, completion. The feeling of a job finished correctly. "I want to ask you something," she said. "Ask." "Are you all right?" she said. "I mean that, the way I mean it when I ask a customer if their car is running right." Not politely, actually. A longer pause than usual. "I am," old Jack said. "I have a knee that does not work properly, and a shoulder that reminds me of things I did 40 years ago. My coffee is not as good as yours." Another pause. "But yes, I am all right." "Come Wednesday," Emma said. "I will be there," he said. The months that followed were the best months Brooks Auto Repair had seen since before Ray's decline. Not easy. Nothing about running a shop was easy, and Emma had no illusions about that. But good in the way that things are good when they are working as they are supposed to work. When the effort you put in produces results that are honest and proportional and your own. Warren Gill's fleet contract transformed the commercial side of the business. 4 months in, Emma hired her first mechanic, a 24-year-old named Marcus Webb, who had finished his trade program at the community college in Billings and was looking for somewhere to learn from someone who cared about doing it right. He was quick and eager in the way of young people who have found the work they are actually suited for. And he made mistakes with the transparency of someone who understood that mistakes were how you learned if you let them be. Emma corrected him the way her father had corrected her, directly, without drama, with the explanation attached. "The reason you torque it in sequence," she told him 3 weeks in when he had rushed a head gasket replacement, "is not because the manual says so. It is because the metal expands unevenly if you do not.
And in 6 months, your customer comes back with a warped head and no idea why. She paused. You want your customers to come back because they trust you, not because you created the problem. Marcus looked at her. Your dad taught you that. My dad taught me everything worth knowing about this work, Emma said, and most of what is worth knowing about most other things. Marcus nodded. He retorqued the sequence correctly. He never rushed a head gasket again. Carol Stanton came back to Clearwater County in February, not to reopen the hardware store. Not immediately. But she came back. She drove into town on a Saturday morning and walked into Brooks Auto because Emma had called her the week before and told her there was coffee if she wanted it, and no obligation to talk about anything she did not want to talk about. Carol was 61, compact and precise in her movements, with the manner of someone who had built something from nothing and knew exactly what that cost. She sat in the waiting area and drank her coffee and looked at the photograph of Ray Brooks on the wall. I remember your father, she said. He came to the hardware store the month we opened, bought a set of drill bits, and told me the place was going to do well. Just said it like it was a fact. She paused. It was the most straightforward encouragement I had ever gotten from a stranger. That sounds like him, Emma said. I have been afraid to come back here, Carol said. Not of Gale. He is done. I have been afraid of what it would feel like to drive down Birch Street and see the building. Is it what you expected? Emma said. Carol looked at her coffee cup. Worse, she said. And better. Worse because it is still standing and he is not in it. And that is just a fact I have to live with. Better because... She paused. Because it is still standing. And maybe that means something. Does it mean you might reopen? Emma said. Carol was quiet for a long moment. Gerald Holton called me, she said. He said he would extend favorable terms to get me started again. And a woman named Patricia Holt called my sister and said she would organize a community support group for the reopening if I decided to do it. Carol looked at Emma. Did you put them up to that? No, Emma said, honestly. Carol looked at the photograph of Ray Brooks again. This town, she said quietly, not in exasperation, in something closer to wonder. I know, Emma said. Carol left 2 hours later. 3 weeks after that, she called Emma and said she was coming back to Clearwater. She had signed a lease on the old hardware store building. Carol Stanton's Hardware was going to reopen in April. Emma heard the news and went and stood in the bay alone for a minute. Just standing there, feeling the shape of something she did not have words for. The sense that what had happened in this shop over the past year had consequences she was still only beginning to understand. That the ripple of one woman refusing to move was still traveling outward in directions she could not fully trace. She went back to work. Jack came every Wednesday through November and December and into the new year. The conversations changed, not in tone, but in texture. Less urgency. More of the easiness that comes when the pressure is off and what is left is just two people who have been through something together, finding out what they are to each other in the absence of crisis. Emma learned things about him slowly, the way you learn things about a person who reveals himself through what he does rather than what he says. She learned that he had ridden for 30 years, that he had grown up in eastern Montana in a family with not much money and a high premium on self-sufficiency. That he had lost a brother in his 40s to a motorcycle accident, that he mentioned once and never mentioned again. She learns that he cooked, really cooked, and that he had a house outside of Great Falls with a garage that contained 3 motorcycles and a workbench that was, by his own admission, better organized than most people's lives. She learned that he had never married. Not from absence of opportunity, but from the specific way some people are made complete in themselves, not diminished by solitude, and cleared enough about their own nature to understand what a partnership with them would require. She learned that he had been serious in his years with the club, and that serious meant things she did not ask him to specify and he did not offer to explain, and that between them this was an acceptable arrangement. She learned that he had been doing versions of what he had done for her quietly, without announcement, in ways that never made the news for a long time. That there were several small businesses in 3 states that were still open because of conversations Jack had had and calls Jack had made and documentation Jack had compiled and submitted through appropriate channels. He did not list them. She assembled the picture gradually from things he said in passing, the way you assemble a complete mechanical picture from individual symptoms. "Do you think of it as a mission?" she asked him once on a cold Wednesday in January when the shop was quiet and the coffee was particularly good. He thought about it. "No," he said. "Then what? I think of it as paying attention to what is worth keeping," he said, "and to what it costs when nobody bothers." Emma looked at him. "You have been paying attention a long time," she said. "Long enough to know what matters," he said. "Short enough that it still surprises me sometimes when things go right." He paused. "I take that as a good sign." In March, Emma hired a second mechanic. Not because she had to. She could have managed with Marcus for longer. But because Tom Reeves sent her his nephew, a 30-year-old named Kevin, who had been working at a dealership in Missoula and was tired of the production line pace of dealership work. He wanted to learn how to do things right rather than fast. Emma interviewed him for 20 minutes and hired him at the end of it. "Why did you leave the dealership?" she asked. "Because they told me I was taking too long on jobs," Kevin said. "And when I asked why, they said, because we charge by the job and not the hour, and time is money. And I said, what about doing it right? And my manager looked at me like I had said something in a foreign language." Emma looked at him. "You start Monday," she said. The shop grew. Not dramatically. Emma was not interested in dramatic growth, which required capital she did not have and management complexity she did not want. She was interested in sustainable growth, the kind her father had practiced, the kind that built something real over time rather than something impressive over a short time. By spring, she had 2 solid mechanics, a commercial fleet account that covered the baseline costs, and a retail customer list that had grown 40% since the previous September. She was not rich. She did not expect to be rich. She was running the shop her father had built, and she was running it right. And that was the thing she had decided to do, and she was doing it. There was a Wednesday in early June, a warm one, the kind of early Montana summer day that feels like an apology for the winter when Jack arrived. And something was different. Emma noticed it when he walked in. Not in anything obvious, in the specific quality of how he moved, a deliberateness that was slightly more deliberate than usual, as if he was paying more attention to each step than he normally needed to. She did not say anything. She poured the coffee and sat across from him and waited. He drank half the cup before he spoke. "I have been having some trouble," he said. Emma kept her voice level. "What kind of trouble?" "Health trouble," he said. He said it the way he said everything, directly, without softening, but also without drama. "My heart. Nothing sudden. The kind of thing that has been building for a while and that I have been mostly ignoring because I do not enjoy thinking about it." Emma looked at him. "How long have you known?" "Suspected for about a year," he said. "Known for certain for about 4 months." 4 months? Since February. Since before Carol Stanton had come back to Clearwater. Since before Marcus had learned not to rush a head gasket. Jack had been sitting in this waiting area every Wednesday for 4 months, carrying something he had not said a word about. "What are you doing about it?" Emma said. "A doctor in Great Falls," he said. "Medication. Some adjustments to how I live." He paused. "I am not dying tomorrow, Emma. I want to be clear about that. I am not building to a dramatic announcement." "Then what are you building to?" He looked at his coffee cup. "I am building to telling you that I will not always be able to come on Wednesdays," he said. "And I wanted you to know why in advance, rather than have it be something you wondered about." Emma held the weight of this, the specific, practical kindness of it. The man who gave almost nothing away voluntarily choosing to give her this because the alternative was the silence of absence. which would be worse. "Thank you for telling me," she said. "You are not going to try to fix it," he said. "It is not a car," she said. He almost smiled. "No," he said, "it is not." He finished his coffee. He sat for a while longer than usual. They talked about Marcus and Kevin, about Warren Gill's fleet, about Carol Stanton's hardware store, which had reopened in April to what Carol described as embarrassingly good turnout. They talked about the road, which Jack said he was still riding, doctors' mild objections notwithstanding. They talked about very little and sat comfortably in the space between what was said and what did not need to be. Before he left, Jack stood at the bay door, the way he sometimes did, and looked at the shop. "Your father would have loved what you have done with it," he said. "I have not done anything dramatic," Emma said. "It looks almost the same." "I know," Jack said. "That is what I mean." He left. The Wednesdays became less regular after that. Some weeks he came, some weeks a Wednesday passed with no sound of the Harley in the parking lot, and Emma let it pass and did not call unless 2 weeks went by without hearing from him. When she called, the conversations were short and honest and enough. He came in late August for the first time in 3 weeks, and Emma poured his coffee without comment and sat across from him and looked at him clearly and saw what she saw. He was thinner. The deliberateness in his movement was more pronounced, but his eyes were exactly the same. The same clear, complete attention. The same quality of being fully present in the space he occupied. "The Harley is running well," he said. "You brought it in July," Emma said. "Marcus serviced it. He did a good job," Jack said. "I told him so." "He was pleased," Emma said. "He tried not to show it." Jack nodded approvingly. "Good instinct." Emma looked at him. "Jack," she said. "Emma," he said, in the same tone. "Is there anything you need?" she said. "Anything at all. I mean that the way you meant it to me." He looked at her for a moment. "No," he said. "I have what I need." "You are sure?" "I have been taking care of myself for a long time," he said. "I know what I need." Emma accepted this. "Then come when you can," she said. "The coffee will be ready." "I know it will," he said. He came 3 more times that fall. The last time was in October. On a Wednesday that was cold and bright in the way of Montana October. The sky a specific shade of blue that only appeared after the first hard frost. He sat for almost 2 hours, longer than he had ever sat. He drank 2 cups of coffee and watched the shop work around him. Marcus and Kevin moving through the bays, Emma on the phone with Warren Gale about scheduling, Tom Reeves dropping off the first of his rigs for its fall inspection. The ordinary, functional life of a working garage on an ordinary Wednesday. He said almost nothing for the 2 hours. When he stood to leave, Emma walked to the bay door with him. He put on the helmet with the deliberateness that was familiar now, that she had learned to read without comment. He started the bike. Then he looked at her through the visor, and she looked at him, and neither of them said anything, because neither of them needed to. He pulled out of the parking lot and turned north toward Great Falls, and she watched the tail light diminish and disappear around the long curve in the highway. She stood in the doorway for a moment after he was gone. Then she went back inside. Jack Callahan died on a Tuesday in December in Great Falls, with the specific quietness of a man who had always been more comfortable with actions than words, and had managed his own ending with the same economy he managed everything else. He was 74 years old. Emma heard from Danny Flores, who called her on Wednesday morning. "He asked me to call you," Danny said. "Made me promise. Months ago." Emma sat down in the chair in her father's office and breathed. "Thank you, Danny," she said. She was quiet for a moment. "Was it peaceful?" she said. "As peaceful as Jack ever was about anything," Danny said. "Which means he was calm and direct, and he did not make a fuss." A pause. He was asking about the shop the day before, whether Marcus was working out. Emma pressed her hand against her mouth for a moment. "Marcus is working out," she said. "That is what I told him," Danny said. "He seemed satisfied."
She closed the shop for the day. She had never closed the shop for any reason other than major holidays, and she did it now without hesitation. Because there are things that matter more than keeping the bays running. And knowing which things those are was something her father had taught her. She drove to Great Falls. She sat with Danny Flores and 2 other men she had seen in her parking lot on the night that mattered. And they drank coffee and talked about Jack in the way that people talk about someone who was genuinely himself for his entire life. With the specific mixture of admiration and affection that comes from knowing a person who never pretended to be anything other than what they were. She learned things she had not known. That Jack had ridden with the club for 28 years. That in those years, he had been involved in things that were serious in ways she had understood without knowing the specifics. That in his retirement, he had developed what Danny described as a thing about small businesses. A particular attention to independent owners being squeezed by larger interests. A pattern he had recognized and decided to do something about in whatever way was available to him. He had a list, Danny told her, not written down, in his head, places he was watching, situations that were developing. He had been watching your situation for almost 2 years before he started coming to the shop. Emma looked at Danny. 2 years, she said. He said your father's shop was the kind of place that Montana could not afford to lose, Danny said, and that it was going to need help that it did not know it needed yet. Emma thought about Jack Callahan 2 years ago, watching from a distance, tracking a predator's movements, positioning himself, and then walking into a shop on a Wednesday in October with a Harley that did not need servicing. Sitting down in the waiting area, drinking 1 cup of black coffee, and deciding that yes, this was the place. And yes, this was worth his time. The weight of it was almost too much to hold. She held it anyway. She drove back to Clearwater County on Thursday morning and opened the shop at 6:30. She found the envelope 2 weeks later. It was in the mail forwarded through a Great Falls attorney's office, postmarked 3 months earlier. Jack had arranged it before he died. Had arranged everything before he died, because that was how he approached things. The envelope contained a single document and a handwritten note on a plain index card. The document was a mortgage release from First Montana Bank, the final balance on Brooks Family Auto Repair, paid in full. Emma sat at her father's desk and looked at the document for a long time. The number on it was not small. It represented something Jack had done quietly through the attorney's office without telling her, without giving her the chance to refuse it, because he had known she would refuse it. She turned to the index card. His handwriting was the way she would have expected it to be. Direct, clear, no unnecessary flourishes. Shops can be rebuilt, engines can be repaired, but courage must always stay open for business. Emma sat at her father's desk in her father's office with the document and the index card in her hands, and she let herself feel the full weight of it. Not just what Jack had done, but what it meant. The specific and irreversible generosity of a man who had decided that something was worth protecting and had protected it completely, right to the very end, in every way available to him. She cried. She did it quietly in the office with the door closed the way her father had taught her, not suppressing it, not ashamed of it, just keeping it private. Because some things belong only to you. Then she washed her face and went back into the bay. Marcus looked up from the engine he was working on. "You okay?" he said. "Getting there," Emma said. "Anything I can do?" Emma looked at him. This young man she had spent 8 months teaching, who had learned to torque in sequence, and to give the reason with the correction, and to take pride in a job done right even when nobody was watching. "Finish that valve cover," she said, "and do it right, always," Marcus said. She went back to work. The first anniversary came in September. The anniversary of the night the trucks had come to the parking lot, the night that had changed the structure of what Emma understood was possible. She did not plan anything for it. She opened the shop at 6:30 and worked through the day the way she always did.
At 4 in the afternoon, she heard the first motorcycle, then the second. She walked to the bay door and looked out. They filled the parking lot. They filled the road in front of the shop. They came from both directions, and they parked with the unhurried coordination of people who had been to this place before and knew how to occupy it without crowding it. Old men and a few women, weathered faces, gray hair. The particular settled quality of people who had decided something was worth their time and did not need to explain why. Danny Flores was in front. He climbed off his bike and walked to Emma. "We figured we would come back," he said, "if that is all right." Emma looked at the crowd behind him. The road was full in both directions, further than she could see clearly. "It is more than all right," she said. Her voice was steady. It cost her something. "What is this?" "Jack had the idea about 6 months ago," Danny said. "Annual ride, Clearwater County as the starting point. Proceeds go to a fund supporting family-owned repair shops that are facing unfair economic pressure." He paused. He wrote up the structure before he died, left it with the attorney. He had already raised the seed money. Another pause. He named it. Emma looked at him. "What did he name it?" Danny reached into his jacket and handed her a folded paper. She opened it. "The Ray Brooks Fund for Independent Business." Emma looked at the paper for a long time. She thought about her father in his bathrobe on a Sunday afternoon, about Jack's belt drive and 4 hours and charge only for the parts, about the invisible architecture of a life lived with integrity, about 31 years of fixing things right, and the reach of that decision, the reach that extended in directions Ray Brooks had never lived to see and could not have predicted, and would have found entirely unsurprising. She looked up at Danny. "He never stopped," she said. "No," Danny said. "He did not." Emma folded the paper carefully and put it in her jacket pocket. She walked to the edge of the parking lot and stood where she could see the road, the full length of it in both directions, lined with riders who had come from multiple states. For a man who would have told them they were making too much of it, and for a shop that was still standing, and for the idea that honest work deserved to be protected by people who understood its value. She stood there and let herself see it completely. Not quickly, not with her mind already on the next job. She looked at every part of it, the motorcycles and the riders, the Montana sky above the highway, and the sign her father had put up 31 years ago. Red letters on white, weathered but solid, exactly where it had always been. Then she turned and went inside. She poured herself a coffee and stood at the workbench where she had always stood. And she thought about Jack Callahan in his Wednesday chair. And she thought about Ray Brooks in his bathrobe on a Sunday afternoon. And she thought about all the invisible things that pass between people when one of them decides to do right and the other decides to pay attention. Strong people do not exist to rule others, Jack had told her. They are here so honest people do not have to stand alone. Emma Brooks had not known when she told 3 men to get out of her father's shop on a rainy September evening that she was doing anything more than refusing to move. She had not known about Jack's 2 years of watching, or his 30 years of earning trust, or the 200 riders on the highway, or the envelope with the mortgage release, or the fund that bore her father's name. She had only known one thing clearly in that moment, with her voice barely above a whisper and her hands free, that this was her father's shop, that it was built right, and that some things, the things that matter, the things that are honest and earned and real, are not for sale, at any price, by any threat, to any man who mistakes the ability to apply pressure for the right to take what belongs to someone else. She set down her coffee. She picked up her wrench. Brooks Family Auto Repair was open for business, and it was going to stay that way.